Good evening, folks. I haven't been able to find Ted yet, but I'm sure he's around here somewhere. It is his talk after all. All right, enough with the corny dad jokes. Let's get down to business. The year is 2007. You just finished a weirdly intense Wii Sports tennis game with your family, and you go to check your new mobile cellular phone, the iPhone 1, and scroll through some news headlines. You find that the final installment of that weird Wizarding Boy book series has just been dropped. All the nerds are going crazy. The hero of Cleveland, at least at the time, just lost his first NBA Finals. And a young, handsome senator tells the world, yes, we can. The final news headline you read seems to tie it all together in an interesting way. The country of Austria becomes the first in the world to lower its voting age to 16 years old. They seem to respond to that familiar refrain with, yes, we will. My name is Nolan McHugh. I'm currently a student at Bowling Green State University studying to become a social studies teacher, student teaching on the east side of Toledo, Ohio. Through my time in the teacher preparation program at BGSU and in my student teaching placement, I've come to the conclusion that it is the necessary next step in our civic education and in our mission as a democracy to promote justice and equity to lower the voting age to 16 years old in local, state, and federal elections. Whoa, pump the brakes there, Nolan. I know some 16-year-olds who I really do not trust voting. And I mean really do not trust voting. Well, why should I listen to you with your glasses and your fancy shirt and tie? Well, first of all, rude. Second of all, in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to break down some of the most common counter-arguments and respond to them with empirical evidence. So, there. Counter-argument number one. 16 and 17-year-olds are just politically immature. They don't know what they're talking about, and they're just parrots for their parents. Well, research from around the world, as you can see behind me in Norway and Belgium, disagrees with you, but I'd like to take us across the ocean and look closer here to home with this research from two researchers from Rutgers University, Camden, who conducted national surveys representative of the entire population aged 14 to 18, as well as that entire 18-plus population in the United States in the year 2011. They were attempting to measure various political competencies and compare differences between these age groups. What they found is that from age 14 to 16, these various political competencies rapidly increased. But once you reach age 16, they sort of stagnate and level off until an individual's mid-20s. This tells us two things. First, that 16 and 17-year-olds are just as politically competent and mature as the rest of the voting eligible population. And second of all, that 16 years old makes sense as the lowest possible legal voting limit, right? So sorry to all the 7-year-olds out there. I know that you were really craving a global revolution, but you're going to have to wait till you can open your own Capri Suns first before you can take to the polls. All right. Counter-argument number two. 16 and 17-year-olds are highly malleable and susceptible to propaganda and demagoguery. Some academics warn and tell horror stories of teenagers falling down what's known as the alt-right pipeline online, an online rabbit hole of misinformation where people are indoctrinated to believe hateful and bigoted conspiracy theories and ideologies. They follow that 16 and 17-year-olds are uniquely susceptible to these ideas, and so to enfranchise them would make them high targets, easily targeted by any malicious or manipulative party. Well, this line of reasoning fails in my view for various reasons. For one, 16 and 17-year-olds are already falling victim to these ideas, and so to claim that the enfranchisement of them would open up this possibility is self-defeating. It's a variable independent of a potential voting age change. How do you like that independent variable? I should have been in the science section, right? Pretty smart, huh? Anyway. Second, many currently voter-eligible adults fall victim to these same hateful and bigoted ideologies. And yet the veracity of their voting status is never questioned. Why? Well, history shows us that attempting to disenfranchise a certain segment of the population based on supposed intelligence always results in systemic discrimination. The last time this argument was used, it was used to justify literacy tests to disenfranchise people of color in the Jim Crow South from voting. And before that, it was used to keep women from voting, who would supposedly be extra votes for their husbands. And the third response I have to that claim is that 16 and 17-year-olds have access to compulsory civic in history education courses. It would come along with an inevitable enhanced and increased level of education in which students would be exposed to impartial presentations on the views of the candidates and the issues, and also enable them to make informed, justice-oriented decisions about their future. If only there were a publicly funded infrastructure in place in which 16 and 17-year-olds are required to take these history and civics courses. I think that would work really great for this idea, right? In any case, the third counter-argument that people make is that 16 and 17-year-olds just don't have enough skin in the game or interest in politics, really. Well, other insights from the Hart and Atkins study and from a 2018 Gallup poll reveal that 16 and 17-year-olds have, and as well as the young people in general, have markedly different opinions on not only economic systems in general, but on serious tangible issues that have an effect on their immediate and long-term futures. Things like climate change, gun policy, student debt, and tuition-free public university. On each of these issues, young people have markedly different views, and yet their preferences are consistently ignored. Furthermore, 16 and 17-year-olds have serious stakes in the political game, stakes which this country was founded over. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Pew Research Center, there are approximately 12 million 16 and 17-year-olds in the United States, of that entire 328 million so American population. Of that 12 million, approximately 22% were employed in the summer of 2019. So I know these are rough figures here, but that equals out to around 2.7 million Americans. 2.7 million tax-paying, politically competent 16 and 17-year-olds who are denied their right to vote. As the revolution that founded this country reminds us, taxation without representation is tyranny. In a country where democracy is supposedly held to the highest value, it is peculiar, to say the least, that such a large portion of our population is stripped of their right to vote, despite funding the state itself. Turning to maybe some more of the positives of this potential voting age change, and looking at voter turnout. It's true that historically and consistently, the age group 18 to 29 has consistently turned out at the lowest levels of any age group, only surpassing that 50% voter turnout rate twice since the voting age was lowered to 18. Why? Well, researchers Ava Zeglovitz and Julian Eichholzer from the University of Vienna postulate that the heaping helping of new responsibilities is to blame for this absence at the polls. Things like applying for and financing an educational future, applying for new jobs, moving out, living independently for the first time, oftentimes in a new town or city, exploring new romantic relationships, starting a family, even giving long-winded TED Talks with occasional bits of self-aware comedy in there to keep your attention. The last thing on young people's minds is, where can I register to vote? I really want to vote. And so to meekly suggest that, hey, it's your civic duty, you really ought to do this. If you don't do this, you're really bad. It's simply insufficient to drive mass voter turnout in youth. Especially when the voter registration process in the US is so long and arduous, with new discriminatory voter ID laws being proposed, and precincts often being out of the reach of Black and brown communities. If you want to get serious about increasing voter turnout, you've got to lower the voting age to 16. This has been the increased voter turnout has been demonstrated in countries where 16-year-old voting is a reality, like in Austria, where 16 and 17-year-olds vote at much higher rates than their little bit older counterparts, 18 to 20-year-olds there. But again, moving across the ocean to the good old USA, there actually are a few localities in the United States which allow 16-year-old voting at a municipal level. The first one to make this change was Tacoma Park, Maryland. They, in 2013, their city council lowered the voting age to 16 years old, and they saw these great effects that in that first election, 16 and 17-year-olds turned out to vote at 44% compared to just 10% of the overall population. In 2015, those figures were 45% for 16 and 17-year-olds compared to just 21% for the overall population. These changes have spread to the nearby cities of Hyattsville and Greenbelt, and they're also voting for 16-year-olds in Oakland, California, but only for school board elections. The point is that these these movements for 16-year-old voting are gaining steam, but they're gaining steam at a local grassroots level. And so, as a result, all of this is to say that 16 and 17-year-olds are politically competent, tax-paying American citizens with access to compulsory history and civics education. And these changes result in higher voter turnout, a more democratic country. It's time that we keep pace with the countries of Austria, Germany, Scotland, Wales, and many Latin American countries that have 16-year-old voting at some level of government, either be it local, state, or federal elections. But as I said, most of these efforts, successful efforts, start at the local level, the grassroots level. So I want to call upon all of you and the Bowling Green community to take the immediate actions to advocate for 16-year-old voting to be adopted in municipal elections in Bowling Green, Ohio. As the home of Bowling Green State University, a public university for the public good, you can see it out there on the billboard on I-75, right? That big message. We must ensure that all of our voices are heard. We must blaze the trails of progress in this city and be a shining example for the rest of our state and the rest of our country. Well, that's all I have to say, so good night, and don't forget to tip your servers.